Welcome to Thursday night fly tying, and we're going to cover a couple of minnow patterns. This is the simple shad, and it was I first saw it on Fly Fish Ohio. It was one of the first podcast style video presentations of fly tying that I was able to find. It was actually, I was finding them on iTunes podcasts several years ago. And the host was Joe Cornwall. And this was a similar to a Dave Whitlock pattern. He had a sheep shad series where he used Icelandic wool and different sheep hairs to make different shad patterns. But a lot of his patterns were real difficult to tie, a lot of steps, took a lot of time. And so the way Joe Cornwall put it is, as bad as he casts, he doesn't want to spend that much time tying a fly and lose it in the trees or on logs or rocks or whatever around the bank. So he tried to find an easier way to make a similar fly. This is one that I did yesterday, so I'd have kind of an example fly of what we're going to do. I actually kind of got a little bit overboard on the materials. Used a little bit too much hair, and that's kind of a common thing with fly tying, but hadn't tied them in quite a while. I think the last ones, I was telling John, I got a best streamer fly for the Cabela's fly tying contest in 2010. So that's probably about the last time I've tied one of these. But the hook that I was tying these on it's a nickel plated. It's actually a hook used for spinner baits as a trailer hook. A lot of times they'll put these on spinner baits. For this one, Joe Cornwall tied it with a monofilament. They have tying thread. So I'll show you an example if I have it here. It's actually a monofilament thread. This is the one I have. There's an ultra fine, and then there's a little bit larger fine, I think, is you can see it on the other side of the spool there. Two different thicknesses, basically, of the thread. It's kind of difficult to work with, of course, real slippery. But when you use the clear thread like that, monofilament, your mistakes show through, the materials show through, and if you don't get a perfect lay of the materials, it'll show right through that clear monofilament. So I'm going to start this is a Vivus 30 denier. It's real strong. It's probably as strong as like a 6/0 thread. But it doesn't add a lot of bulk, and I'll show you why when we get to the next step. I'm just going to get that started. And with any of the GSP threads, Semperfly and this Vivus, I don't know if you can tell on my thread, you can probably see a little bit of wax on there. I just basically used tying wax. Kelly was talking about using thread wax to help with the grip on a lot of the GSP threads. And I was talking with Al, and he said all he's ever used is their fly tying wax, their dubbing wax, the tacky stuff, and that helps it grip a little bit. So until I get some actual thread wax. That's basically what I did, is just ran that across the top of the tube on the dubbing wax, just to help it grip a
Mike,
little bit. Yeah, go ahead.
I put a dab of Sally Hansen's on my hook when I use that kind of thread.
That suppose that'd
I
work
just
too.
put a little bit of Sally Hansen's across the hook before I put the thread on.
Right. That'd be a good way to do it too. This is holding pretty good. There's only a few wraps there. Normally with a GSP, if you pulled on about 6 wraps like that, you'd probably be pulling it out. But anyway, to start this off, I'm going to use a red yarn and just do a few wraps to get the ends wrapped. I want to go just about to the middle of the hook, almost to the middle of the hook. And then I'll bring that back forward to about right here. I just want to leave just a red bump there. And this isn't going to show when the fly is done. But once the fly gets wet, that's going to really show through the as gills, or almost going to show almost a pink color through the materials.
Mike, is that an acrylic or a wool yarn?
That's just whatever I found. It's probably like an Antron or acrylic or whatever.
Okay, thank you.
Definitely not wool. So now the rest of the fly is going to be tied pretty much in that section right there. So that's why if you were using a heavy enough thread to hold those materials down, if you're using, say, a 140 denier thread, you'd probably build the head up so big that it wouldn't work out very good. So the materials that are used for the body is Icelandic wool. So I think that's focused. You can see it's a real long hair, probably 6-7 inches long in total. Comes on a little hide strip like that. And you can see a lot of dense wool down here, and then all the long hair that hangs off of there. So obviously, if I was going to tie this streamer, and I just used the ends of the hair, I'd use this whole section to make that one fly. But there's a trick to using this stuff, and Al Beatty alludes to it a lot on his some of his flies where they use the calf tail, where there's several lengths of hair in any clump of hair that you pull off. So I just cut a section loose, about like that. Of course, there's not enough of that to make the streamer, but if I could zoom out a little bit here. Basically what I want to do here is any of the wild fibers like that, I'm just pull that out of the way. But I'm going to go out to these very tips and just grab them and just snatch them out of there. Well, I've got some hair there that's about 6 inches long. Now I'm going to lay that up against the rest of this and try to even up the tips pretty much. So a little bit more. And then I'm going to grab all of those tips and yank those out. So now I've got some 6 inches long and some about maybe 4 or 5 inches long. And then one more time at the tips, I'm going to grab a little bit more of this stuff and pull that out. So all of this shorter stuff and the wool I'm going to toss that. So now I'll take that bundle and then just gather it up. And then I can kind of, this is basically hand stacking. I can just kind of go through there, and that's about what I want. There's a couple of real wild ones here that I'll pull out. Some of these hanging down. So that's what I want for most, probably about 2/3 of the fly. I'm going to measure that so that that hair goes out about a hook shank past the bend of the hook there. And then I'm going to cut that off over my waste bin. And I'm actually going to tie this underneath. I lost my light. Let me move this over a little bit. You can see that. Tie that on the bottom of the hook. I went too far back there. Let me redo this. A lot of times you say it's good enough and you just tie it on there, and then you end up with problems later on. So don't be afraid to go back and redo a step. This time, so I can see where I'm going, I'm going to actually just lay it up like this. Zoom back in. There we go. That went on there better. And this is a slippery hair, similar to squirrel. And I'm just going to kind of divide it across the point of the hook there. And bring it under as the belly. I'm going to take just a little bit more of that white. Not nearly as much as what I did for the belly. Grab another section here. And then I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to start with the tips. Pull them out. Even up those tips. And then pull out the shorter. One more time. And I don't want to go any shorter than that because these are starting to get into real woolly stuff that'll cause too much bulk. All right, so I'll clean up this bundle, the real long ones out of there. Put that top section on. I want it to be back to about the same point, so measuring that from where I am, I want it to be right about there. I'll cut that over the waste bin. And tie that right on top. It's real tight wraps. Right? So I'm split over the hook there for the bottom. And there's the top white part. And then I've got a lot more gray than I do white. Lost me. All right. So I'm going to grab a bunch of this. I don't want too much now. I think that'll probably end up being about enough. So I'll select that section, cut it down at the bottom, and then grab the tips and pull that out. I can use my other fingers to kind of line up those tips. Grab it again. And then one more time and throw away the rest. All I have is those guard hairs, none of that dense wool from the base of it. Got a little bit too much. So I'll just pull out the wild ones.
Can you zoom out a little, Mike?
I'm sorry. Yep. I did zoom in too far, didn't I? All right. So I've basically taken out the ones that don't seem like they'll cooperate, because I do have a little bit too much hair there. That should be just about right. I need to be a little bit shorter than what I had there. So right about there, I'll cut it off. And lay that gray over the top. All right. I'm just going to clean up some of these weird ones so they're not bothering me in my way. Take a little bit of crystal flash. Maybe I'll use 2 strands. About right there. Wraps and fold these over the other side. Okay. Add a little bit of flash in there. Then, oh, there's my other cheek. So for the cheeks, I use, I'm going to zoom out again here. And I use mallard flank feathers. And when I bought these, it came in a huge bag. And the reason the bag was really big was all these feathers had all the fluff on the bottom. So I just sat watching TV one day and pulled all that fluff off and reduced it down to just the usable part of the feathers and put them in a Ziploc. So it's got basically all sizes of mallard flank. And so I just go into that bag to get whatever I need. And for this fly, the cheeks are mallard flank. And so on each side, you'll have one of these to just give it that kind of scale look, like that. So I want it to be about half of the hair. So right about like that. And Just hold it against the side so I can kind of get it to lay flat, and that looks pretty good. And I'll snip out that stem. And then I'll roll it over. Put that other cheek on there. About half the fly, so that should be pretty close. And I'll lay that flat. All right. Now, one other thing that makes this look really good, we didn't have it laying out, is to take a couple strands, maybe 3, of peacock herl, and grab some decent looking ones here. Go with 4. And then I'll just kind of stroke them and make them, make sure they're kind of lined up pretty evenly. The tips are pretty even. And ideally, you want them to kind of bend in the right direction. And just lay those over the top. For a little bit of dressing. Any bait fish is going to have a be darker on the top and fade down into lighter colors down to white for the belly. About every bait fish is white on the belly or cream. All right. Kind of finish up that head a little bit, which is pretty hard with this thin Beavis, but a lot of times you can get that peacock herl to bend a little bit like that. But it definitely will when it's wet. And then we'll put some eyes on. So I have these are holographic. You can find all kinds of these stick-on eyes. Some of them are kind of a thicker plastic. These are basically like stickers. But you can get them with plastic to where they're almost like a 3D. But it's pretty easy to get them on the end of your bobbin like this. And then use your thumb to stick them onto that. Mallard flank there, onto that cheek. Grab another one here. Then I'll go ahead and whip finish. I could have done that before I put the eyes on, but we're going to put a lot of UV on here, so it doesn't matter that you do a back to front whip finish. Maybe give it another one. Now, the best thing to do with this UV resin is to go a little bit at a time. Want to get it over the head, and just a little bit onto that eye area. Same here. Then I'll use my UV torch, set that UV glue. A little bit more on. A little bit on the eye and then a little bit onto the, you can get a little bit into that mallard flank. And set it good. And that's a simple shad. It did take quite a bit, but it didn't take a lot of materials. And once you actually go through it without trying to explain every step, it's actually a pretty easy streamer to tie. And really, once that's wet, that really comes down and looks like a shad. That eye also serves to kind of be certain species of shad have a little dark spot, but it's just a trigger point for the fish to go after. So there's a simple shad. The lights aren't really letting that gray show very good. That light was kind of overblowing it. If that helps at all, that's kind of worse.
Mike, do you ever tie it with the weed guard?
I don't. I used to do a lot of poppers with like hair wing. What am I trying to say? The deer hair, stacked deer hair poppers and stuff like that with weed guards. I'm definitely not against it. There's I've seen some people tie it to where it's just like a stiff piece of monofilament that hangs down a little ways, and that'll just cause this to kind of deflect from a stick or weeds or whatever. But using a fly like this for bass around in Nebraska, you're definitely going to be around in some weeds and you're going to catch some. I just kind of grew used to every couple casts I have to pick some weeds off of it.
Okay.
And that's just personal. I'm afraid sometimes that a weed guard, you can tie them on the back of the hook, actually run the monofilament along the hook like that, and then have it be a little bit loose coming up to the eye. Sometimes I'm afraid that that's going to prevent a hook set or two. But it's definitely doable if you have a good method for doing that. My grandpa used to take a rubber band, run it through the eye of the hook, and then hook it over the barb of the hook. So if you kind of loop it through there and run it through the loop, and then hook that over the barb, that's kind of a quick weed guard if you decide you need one. That is at least my rendition of the simple shad. Now the other one, Ward Bean is, I think he's Council Bluffs. I saw this done by him, and I don't know if it was a book or a magazine article. I know I've seen this in a magazine article. And in the sheet that I provided for that was attached to the email, it gave the name of the tire, but I don't remember the guy's name. But this is a excellent crappie fly. This was the first one I started catching crappie on, and then after that, I started getting into all kinds of different streamers, and so I used just about everything through the course of fishing for crappie. On this one, I'll show you where we're going with it. Called the Super Silver Minnow, or Silver Minnow. I've also seen it. And again, we use the mallard flank, but underneath it is several colors of marabou. And you can just kind of freestyle this, but a lot of times you want to have about a third of it to a half, maybe end up being white on the bottom. This has got blue, pink, green, yellow. And basically what I did, I don't have, the bags won't really tell you anything, but in a craft store, they were selling just a bag of mixed marabou. That's not focused. But all different colors of marabou. And so again, I cleaned it up, cleaned up the stems and the unusable stuff. And basically all this is a few barbs of marabou in different colors with the mallard flank over the top. So this is a streamer hook, a size 6. Probably do different sizes. But that seems to be a good proportion as far as the length of the shank. And I'm going to use this holographic silver tinsel. You could use any silver tinsel, but this is what I have the most of. Before I saw this, I used to just tie it with the regular silver on one side, gold on the other side tinsel. Hang on a second, I gotta get it out of there we go. Grab a section before I start the thread. And I'm just gonna use a black thread on this. Actually, no reason not to go 140 denier. But when you're tying lots of different colors of marabou, you just need to kind of focus on thread control a little bit. You don't want to get too many wraps on each one of those colors of marabou, and I'll show you why as we get a little closer to that step. Whenever I use for fishing flies, this isn't necessarily necessary if you're going to use it for show, but I like to rib that mylar tinsel with a silver, gold, copper, just any kind of a wire rib. And that just makes it so that if a fish's teeth kind of damage the mylar, it doesn't completely unwrap. You might get a section to unwrap or two. This tinsel, that's kind of a messed up end where it was in the cap. Cut that off. This is very thin, so it's not going to cause any bulk. I'll just tie that in at the end of the hook and just make sure I'm right. at the end of that shank, about there. And then I'll wrap forward. Is that centered pretty good? Yeah, it's not bad. Let me zoom in a little bit. I don't think I'm going to do a whole lot of materials work here. So I'm just going to wrap this forward. This is a large tinsel. It's just easier to wrap the body. I've done it in the past with Flashaboo. You're going to end up with spaces, and it's not going to look as clean. But I like this large holographic tinsel. A lot more shine to it. You don't really get those. If you can see on the tinsel, it's got like little circular spots. If you're using this as like on a streamer as a lateral line or just a piece of flash hanging off of there, you'd be able to kind of detect those round spots. But when you wrap it like this, it's really just a lot more flash to it. So I'll tie that down. And then cut it out of the way. Lost in the head. And then you can reverse wrap, but it doesn't really matter. Just with spaced wraps, that's going to help hold that Mylar down if it gets cut.
Mike, if you put Sally Hansen on the hook and wrapped it up, will that bond that?
You definitely could. A lot of people using Mylar put down a layer of super glue. I don't like super glue for things like Mylar because a lot of times, to me, it gives it sometimes it'll give it like a real chalky appearance.
Okay.
But definitely could use some head cement over that. You could use some UV glue. So for this fly, that's pretty much the body. And now all you need to do is load it up with some marabou. So a couple tricks with this stuff. I cleaned this feather up quite a bit. It was pretty long and had a lot of trash at the bottom. But you want to go for this stuff that, in the middle, it's kind of has some fuzz to it. The length doesn't really matter, and I'll show you why. So I'm going to take maybe 10, about 10 marabou fibers. And then with the tips all kind of lined like that, you can save yourself a little bit of bulk by just kind of tugging at that. And you see how you get some of that, some of those little barbules kind of pull off of there, some of that fuzz. And then I'm going to spin my thread clockwise as if you're looking down on it to kind of cord it up, because I want to bite into that marabou without using a whole lot of thread wraps. So that's like 4 wraps, and that'll hold it pretty secure. Now you can see that pretty long right there. If I was to cut that, I'll cut the very ends here. If I was to cut that, you'd have very blunt, sharp ends like that. So with marabou, if you want to shorten it, the best way to do it is just to grab it where you want it to be and then just tear it loose like that. And that has more natural ends to it. So I want a little bit of flow there. Do a couple more wraps so I don't lose everything here. I'm going to turn it upside down. I'm just going to do a little bit more white. So I'll grab about another 9 or 5. And then I'll strip that marabou off of there. So all I really have is those stems. Tie that down. Oops. Let's do this a little more control. Get a little bit more on the bottom there. And then again, I'll pull those tips off. All right, so that gives me a pretty good amount of white there. So now grab a little bit of green. There's a section of a green feather. You just keep doing that, but you don't want to overdo it. So maybe 5 barbules. Just put a little bit of green in there. Maybe it's about 5. Tie the green ones down. Now, since you're wrapping over these, you don't have to use a whole lot of wraps. This isn't a slippery material. It'll kind of condense. I'll use a little bit of yellow. Quite a bit. About like that. I'm going to cut those tips even. Strip a few of those little fibers off. Nice and clean. You can kind of arrange them around the hook a little bit. I got that green a little bit more on the other side and the yellow here. Maybe some blue. And again, if you go to a craft store like this and you get these, it's probably not the best dye in the world. Actually, the reason I'm doing this fly last is because that dye does come off in your fingers a little bit. So this fly won't last all summer long. The dye will kind of bleed between the colors a little bit. What I'm doing, I'm kind of stripping down some of the bottom of this because it was some of those little barbs weren't the best. And I'll grab about 5 or 6 of those. And put some blue in. Cut those tips even. Tie the blue in. Now I think we're pretty good there. Marabou. And then just kind of look at all those tips and, you know, those are okay. You don't want them to be real blunt. That all blends together pretty good. So now I'm going to take a mallard flank feather and just kind of look at what you want for the size. It's not too bad if a few of these hang out past the bend, past the end of the mallard flank. And I want it to kind of tent over there a little bit, but I think I'm going to take, I think you can just pull a few of these off the bottom like that. I like that. Then we'll just lay that over the top and just see how I'm kind of rolling it right from the top. Just kind of roll the feather down over the sides like that. Give it a few good wraps with some space here between those wraps and the eye. So when I cut this loose, I can cover it up. If you start at the eye and you do this, then the stem is going to stick out. You won't be able to really cover it up. Cut that off. Make sure that's dented good. And then I'll start here at the eye and just kind of build up over that stem. A little bit of a black head here. And then I'll whip finish. And cut it. Wait, I'll do a Tim Flagler here. Oh, break it loose. So that is a super silver minnow. Oh. Put too much UV resin on there. Try to take some of that off. Whoops, sorry about that. Make sure it's not in the eye. And I'll zap it. You can use any head cement. You don't have to use the UV. I just like the nice shiny hard head like that. It looks like I did get some in the eye still. That'll all come together and that color will show through. A little bit of shine from the tinsel body. Sure. Yep, I did get some in there. So this UV, sometimes you can just like paint in a jig eye. And just pop it through there and it'll come out. There's my little end right there. All right. Super silver minnow.
Hey, Mike, that fly is a Tom Keith.
Tom Keith, that's it.
Yeah, he's from Lincoln, Nebraska.
I didn't know he's from Lincoln.
Yeah, I've got his book right here. It's Fly Tying and Fishing for Panfish and Bass. It's on page 138. And he was with Game and Parks. And he used to fish a lot.
I remember that name. I remember that name from Game and Parks.
And he used to fish a lot with a member of our church, Verl Borg, who is a huge fly fisherman. In fact, Verl is in the book in a lot of the photographs.
Wow. So it had this super silver minnow?
Yes, it does.
How close did I get?
Pretty close.
Because a lot of that's out of memory.
And the book is black and white because it was published in 1989, and his forward was written in 1987. So,
yeah. I think it looks better with a little bit of pink in it, like this one. But I think I have way too much marabou in this overall. That just makes it kind of bulky.
Yeah, please.
But when it gets wet, it's kind of hard to tell how that'll be. I don't want to lick it and put it back in the vise. So those are definitely two flies you can use for bass, wipers, white bass if you got them. Is there any places around, there a place around Lincoln with white bass still?
yeah, Salt Creek's got him, and I believe Oh, I don't remember what white Salt Valley Lakes got them.
I think Holmes has some in it.
Holmes
Don't
Lake.
look at me, man.
Yeah, Holmes Lake in Lincoln. What'd you say, Dave?
What'd you say, John?
Never mind.
Will these flies fish very deep or?
So definitely with the super silver minnow, you could definitely weight the body with lead. Whether it's or lead substitute, of course. Whether it's a lot of times I like to use a zonker strip and cut it into about maybe an eighth of an inch, eighth to a quarter of an inch wide, and then just wrap the wrap that lead tape. By zonker strip, I meant the lead tape that's used in zonker flies. It's sticky on one side, and just the lead, like a lead tape. Just build the body with that. You can do one layer and then come in a little ways and do another layer, so it gives a little bit of a taper. And then just wrap your thread base over that and put your tinsel over that and weight this one. I'm sorry, this one didn't have the body, but you could. This is kind of a heavy hook, actually. I mean, it'll sink slowly, but that's how I like to fish for bass and crappie anyway, is in about 3 to 4 feet deep of water, so it doesn't need to sink very fast.
Okay.
I guess if I was going to fish this fly, I'd probably use a little bit of split shot or one of those fancy what do they call them, poly leaders and stuff like that add weight to your end of your leader. On these, I would do a lead body.
Lead body.
Okay.
If you're putting them in your fly box and some of them are weighted and some aren't, some people will put a red head or a red stripe on the head. Some traditional flies have a red stripe for that's just how they were designed. But I always get frustrated when I have to try to figure out which ones my streamers are weighted and which ones aren't, just by feeling them. Sometimes you can't really tell. So a lot of people will do a red head or a certain color of thread head for their weighted flies, and just regular black for their non-weighted.
Well, I never catch crappies, and I think they're supposed to go down deeper than I go down. That's why I kind of wondered. And you said these are crappie flies.
So you in Omaha?
Yes.
Okay. So I'll try to get the word out this year, but there's probably about a 6-week window in the spring where the male crappie come in shallow and start preparing spawning beds.
Okay. I didn't know they did that.
They're anywhere, any lake that has crappie and it has riprap. It's not all riprap. I haven't figured out the exact science. Walnut Creek, for example, there's a corner of the dam that usually does pretty well, but there's part of the dam where you rarely see any. So I don't know if it's the deep water that's off of it, what the science is about why they pick those areas. But you can stand within about maybe a 50 to 100 foot section and just catch crappie like all day long.
Yeah, I usually catch about 2 or 3 a year. That's about it.
Right. They so when they're in their spawning beds, the males will come in and set up the spawning beds. The females will come in and say, okay, I like your house, so I'll lay my eggs here. And then they stay there to protect the eggs. So there's probably a pretty good 5, maybe 6 week window where they're in shallow enough water to where you can see a lot of them.
Okay.
I think the bigger ones, I think as a general rule, the the further out from the bank you can go, maybe a little bit deeper water, closer to 4 to 6 feet, you're going to find the bigger ones.
Mike, sorry to interrupt. I'm going to have to go. Thanks for the
Okay.
2 great flies.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Good to see you tonight.
All right.
But most of the time you can see them if you walk along that riprap. If you look down in the water carefully, a lot of times there's muck out a ways, you know, in the lake, but it's the real shallow water, and you can see them down in there a lot of times, and they're chasing little bluegills away from their nest, you know, whatever they're doing, but they're darting back and forth sometimes, or sometimes they're just laying there. You can see a big old crappie there, but they're all those males that are sitting on the beds are normally going to be 9 to 10 inch, but a lot of times 11, 12. And depending on what your lake has. But I mean, like in Walnut Creek, I've seen 11 and 12 inch males right there on the beds. And they're the real dark black, they call it having their tuxedos on when they're on the spawning beds like that, because they're a real dark coloration. Maybe it's attracting females or showing off or whatever.
I've only fished Walnut Creek way up at the source, where the campground is there, not the dam.
Right. A lot of times I'll either park on the east side of Walnut Creek and then walk down the walking trail toward the dam and then just fish along those rocks. Other times I'll park over there where Pizza Hut and all that strip mall is over there. It's a little more difficult. Got to kind of walk down through the trees a little bit and then up over the dam. It's a little bit shorter walk, but of course you got to walk up over the dam, so it's kind of steep with wet grass. Sometimes it can be a pain, but
Mike, I got to run. I've got a TU meeting up in Sioux Falls, so
okay.
I will. I'll talk to you later tonight.
All right, we'll see you.
Bye.